Lamar Jackson impressed on the final day of Baltimore Ravens mandatory minicamp. We talk about that and so much more coming up next here on this Purple Friday edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here with you today on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen. Each and every day, we're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, wherever you get your shows as well. In audio form, we have you covered Monday through Friday, both ways. You're not missing out on any content, whether you want to watch or listen to the show. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens, we have a lot to talk about today as the Ravens wrapped up their mandatory minicamp. Now, not a ton in terms of way of what happened at practice on Thursday. It was really, by all accounts, a laid-back practice, chill practice, but there were a couple of notes from it, particularly Lamar Jackson impressing with his throws. So we're going to be talking about just generally what happened over the course of Thursday, which again was not really much, but we'll also get into what a lot of the players at the podium had to say, including Kyle Van Noy, who was up there. He talked a lot about Zach Orr. We'll talk about what he had to say about a lot of different things. Then we'll also get into what Marcus Williams had to say about his injury stuff from last year, which didn't really go into too much detail. And then John Harbaugh gave some injury updates. So we'll talk about that as well. So appreciate everybody being here. I think we're going to do at least one bonus episode. Again, we're Monday through Friday consistently on Locked On Ravens 5 days a week. But I think we're going to do, like we did last week for OTAs, a general takeaway observation episode tomorrow on Saturday. So that'll be a bonus episode. And then maybe we'll come back with one on Sunday. I haven't decided about that yet, but I will let you know for tomorrow's show if we're going to do that. And if you haven't checked that out yet, highly recommend you go do so if you're watching this in the future to see if there's a Sunday bonus episode, but that will be probably about Steve Young, who we'll talk about today as well. So let's talk about what happened on Thursday. Lamar Jackson ended up hitting a few nice passes. Shout out to Nikhil Mehta for the analysis here. Nikhil's been great given Ravens coverage and Ravens notes, so shout out Nikhil. But he says that Lamar Jackson hit a few nice passes downfield during 7-on-7s, rifling a completion to Rashad Bateman in traffic, then arcing a beautiful deep ball to Tez Walker for a touchdown. Now, we had Qadri Ismail on here, who's former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, won the Super Bowl with the Ravens back in 2000, and he's been out there at minicamp. So he talked a bit about how Rashad Bateman and Lamar Jackson, there have been really good points for them, and then there have been points of frustration. He said that there have been more good points than points of frustration, but it's nice to see that be a highlight of camp because we know just how valuable Rashad Bateman has to be for the Ravens this year in order to compete for a Super Bowl. Him being their clear-cut, unquestioned number 2 wide receiver. Seems like they have had some moments of not being able to connect, but again, you want to get that out of the way now, right? You want to have the work because you have to start somewhere. We know that Lamar Jackson and Rashad Bateman have not had a ton of time together on the field over the course of their career. It's been a bunch of Bateman missing time and him being out with injury. And then obviously Lamar, he's also missed some time and had to be out with injury too. And it just feels like the two guys can't line it up for the majority of the season. In fact, they haven't yet. So in my opinion, I think that them getting this chemistry down now, which is going to involve some hiccups, right? We have to see the hiccups before we can see some of the successes. Some guys just need more time to get that chemistry going. And when you don't have that time on the field, it does take away from it. So glad to see that Lamar ended up completing a pass to Bateman in traffic, which, by the way, there was a pass on, the Ravens put out they always put out like hype videos, and the social team put out a video of just highlights from minicamp. And there was a pass from Lamar Jackson that I do not know. I might put it out tomorrow. I do not know how he made this throw. But tomorrow, I mean today. Today is Friday. I'm recording this early on Friday morning, late on Thursday night. But there was a throw, literally, you can see a defender's arm come to try to slap away the ball. And he somehow gets it barely over the defender's hand, over the defender's arm to complete it to Mark Andrews, I believe it was. And I don't know what day that was on. Again, this is an encapsulation, that video, I think, of all 3 days. But Lamar in some of those throws looked really good. I know he had some interceptions on day 1 of minicamp, but the offense recovered as a whole on day 2 and day 3. Lamar impressed there. But let's talk about Tez Walker for a little bit. This is one of the most positive storylines to come out of all these offseason workouts so far, whether it be rookie minicamp, OTAs, obviously minicamp here, as we're talking about. They're going to need Tez Walker this season. Now, it's not going to be as big of a role. He's not going to play as big of a role as Zay Flowers is going to, as Rashad Bateman is going to. Probably even Nelson Aguilar is going to. But there is a clear open path for that number 4 job. In fact, I think if I had to kind of rank guys right now, Tez Walker is pretty clear cut in that number 4 receiver spot behind the 3 guys I just mentioned. He's a bigger body player. He excels in contested catch situations. He has 4.36 speed, which, by the way, we've heard the Torrey Smith comparisons. Eric DeCosta, very vocal about that. So you want to know what Torrey Smith ran at the 40? 4.36. They have the exact same 40 time. And I think Tez Walker is, I think he's about a half of an inch or an inch taller than Torrey was. But both of those guys, they could do a lot on the football field. I don't think Tez Walker is going to have as big of a role as Torrey did in his rookie season, but he can play that deep ball player. And I think, honestly, if Tez has a big enough role this year and he's making an impact for the Ravens, especially in that deep passing game, and he can establish a good connection, at least, great or good, with Lamar Jackson, I think that will take pressure off of both Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, because last year, if you remember, the Ravens had to utilize those guys as 3-level receivers. And it's not that they're not 3-level receivers. They absolutely can be. But I think if Tez Walker can be in that specialized role, or at least have some level of a specialized role, you can focus on Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman more so, not exclusively, but more so in the short to intermediate passing game. And with both of their route running skills, both Flowers and Bateman, I think that's where you can better utilize them if you're Baltimore, and still put them on a deep route. Don't eliminate that from their game. It's in their skill sets, but it just takes pressure, right? If you alleviate pressure off of those guys, I think it opens up the offense even more. And that to me is a really intriguing part of this whole thing as well. So Jackson, by all accounts here, was the quote unquote star. It was a very, more so, as I mentioned, laid back and show practice. So the star of one of those, Nikhil called it a last day of school vibe at Ravens minicamp yesterday. He ended up Lamar ended up trying to join the defensive huddle. Players were smiling, laughing, and chirping all throughout the morning. And Nikhil also saying that players were having fun with the ball security drills, trying to knock the football out of each other's hands, ending mandatory minicamp on an upbeat, positive practice. So, that's what you want. We all know how the vibes were last year at the end of the season in that AFC Championship game. We know that those players still feel those vibes, and it's not fun. It's not great. Chiefs actually just got their Super Bowl rings yesterday. Sorry to bring that up, but, you're kind of thinking back to it, and we have Patrick Ricard talking about the AFC Championship game, and we'll get to that in a little later. But in my opinion, these are the vibes that the Ravens need. And these were the vibes all last season, right? It was good vibes for the most part. They were winning. We know winning cures everything. These practices don't have to be, okay, let's go. We're doing this. We're doing It doesn't have to be like that. And it's not like that. Of course, it's a serious thing. You're trying to get better, trying to learn terminology, et cetera, et cetera. Derrick Henry was very vocal about that on Wednesday. He was talking about how it's a challenge for him, or a new challenge at least, trying to learn all this new terminology, but he's ready. He says he's a sponge, learning all this stuff. So it is serious about, especially for these new players, getting acclimated and everything. But you can have a chill vibe. You can go out there and just have some fun. It's about winning football games, and this is work to get there. But football's, it's all sports, honestly. There has to be a fun element, a culture element. We know Baltimore is one of the best culture teams in this league. We talk about it all the time. On the field, obviously, their on-field culture and what they do on the field is known for, and it speaks for itself. But off the field, it's just a different dynamic. So, there wasn't a lot to account for in terms of what actually happened on the practice field due to it being more of a laid-back practice. But it seemed like the offense trended upwards throughout this training camp. I'm trying to skip ahead a little bit. Mini camp is what I'm trying to say, where on that first day, I mentioned there were some struggles, whether it be false start penalties, illegal formations, interceptions, bobbles, drops, whatever. Then we saw the offense recover yesterday and have that thing, or 2 days ago, I guess, on Wednesday. And then yesterday, it was that show practice, Lamar being the quote-unquote star again. So Exciting times again. Now the Ravens have that long hiatus, and then before we know it, we will be at training camp where there's even more to take away. So I know without pads on, you can't take a lot away from that, right? It's kind of like, oh, okay, cool. Lamar hit a couple passes. That's fun. It's great. It doesn't take away the fact that he was the star of the practice, apparently. But again, it's like, what can you really take away from some of these OTA practices, these minicamp practices? Some, it's not like you have nothing to take away, but I'm not reading into this and saying, okay, they're winning the Super Bowl or they're done, the season's over, right? I think that'd be a little bit of an overreaction, just a little bit, in my opinion. So we're not going that far. Coming up in the second part of the show, though, we'll talk about what some of these guys had to say at the podium yesterday. John Harbaugh, Kyle Van Noy, Marcus Williams. Stay tuned. We got a lot to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up the peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has it covered. With over 120 million parts, your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Although parts can be the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. All times, all exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. We're back, our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Purple Friday. And really appreciate everybody for being here today, making us a part of your day here on Locked On Ravens. Also, be sure to make Locked On Sports Today a part of your day as well. Peter Bukowski gives you all the latest insight on sports throughout all the sports world, not just one. So Peter does a great job over there. Check out Locked On Sports Today, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just at 7,000 subscribers here on Locked On Ravens. It's been an incredible journey. Really appreciate everybody who's an everydayer, who listens every single day. Shout out to you. If you're new to the channel, shout out to you too. Welcome in. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And whether you're in audio form or video form, I know there's technically no like button on the podcasting platforms. At least I don't think there is, but be sure to subscribe, follow along over there. And if somewhere in the middle, thank you for tuning in. Welcome back in to the channel. So really appreciate everybody's support. Let's talk about John Harbaugh giving some injury updates. Now, I'm looking here on my phone. My computer is on the way out, so I need to pull this up on my phone, or else the stream might crash where I'm recording this. So hopefully that does not happen. But Marlon Humphrey's been the big topic of conversation over the course of the last week or so. It hasn't really popped up all that much until this last week, where I think everyone's like, okay, Marlon was super injured, and the whole year last year was dealing with a lot of different stuff. But I think everybody was kind of under the assumption that, all right, he'll be good to go, be full go for all offseason workouts, and that'll be fine. Well, Marlon has been on the field. He's been off the field. He hasn't been practicing. And so he was not on the field on Thursday. First of all, let's get into who was not out there. Shout out to Jeff Rebeck for this one. Deontay Hardy, who we talked about, has an excused absence from mandatory minicamp. Then you have Kyle Hamilton with his elbow. We'll talk about that. Nelson Aguilar, Keaton Mitchell with his knee, Marlon Humphrey. Then you have Christian Matthew, Adisa Isaac with the hamstring, Michael Pierce, Bashan McCary, Rayshad Nichols, and TJ Tampa also was watching practice on Thursday. Now, John Harbaugh was asked about Marlon Humphrey and ended up saying, just nagging things. He should be ready for training camp. It shouldn't be a problem. It's been very vague. I mean, I think everybody's been kind of wondering this for, again, this short amount of time. There hasn't really been a pure update into what is going on, whether this is stuff from last year, whether it's new stuff that happened during the offseason or during workouts or during a certain practice. We don't really know what's going on with Marlon. There hasn't been any designation in terms of what he's actually dealing with right now. Now, I know the conversation around Marlon is largely based off of his season last year, which I think was a standard, down year for Marlon standards, right? Like, I think we're so used to talking about Marlon as a top 5 corner and someone firmly in that conversation, but the injury certainly took a toll on him last year and just, I think, had a down standard in a lot of different ways, according to what we believe Marlon is and can be and what we've seen him be. Now, I think that Marlon still is firmly in those top 10 to 12 cornerback conversations. I don't know if he's firmly in that top 5 conversation anymore, but I think when healthy, Marlon is still an incredible corner in this league. And I think a lot of the criticism, I'd say, surrounding Marlon comes from, either him being injured last season or some of the big plays he gave up last year, which again, like we can acknowledge that happened. I'm not saying Marlon's the perfect corner. Again, it's why I think he's kind of in that top 10 now instead of that top 5 league wide. But the Ravens need Marlon Humphrey to compete. Not that they, I guess, can't do it without him, but he's a huge part of their defense. You can never have enough corner depth, and when you have an all-pro corner on your roster, hey, it'd be pretty cool if you could get that production out of him, first of all, which I think if he's healthy, can have that bounce back year. But it's like, okay, well, is this something that we're going to get it to training camp and all's going to be good? He's going to be out there practicing and we can forget about it? Or is he still going to be limited and there's something that we don't know yet? So I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. John Harbaugh, obviously, saying he should be ready for training camp. That doesn't mean he will be. We'll have to see. But I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, concern-wise, maybe like a 2.5 for me. Maybe a 3, and anywhere from 2 to 3. So I'll compromise at 2.5. It's just because like we don't know what's going on. Like John Harbaugh said, it's nagging stuff, should be fine for training camp. Okay, like he's not making a big deal about it. Now, maybe there's something else going on. I don't know, but I'll keep it at a 2 to 3 for now. And then if we get to training camp and stuff is still going on, that concern meter obviously will rise up. Now Harbaugh also gave an update on Kyle Hamilton yesterday. We talked about that with Kaji Ismail. We talked about it. He gave an update 2 days ago. We talked about it yesterday with Q. But Hamilton had some loose bodies removed in his elbow, and he should be ready for training camp, John Harbaugh said. Now, Q talked with this about us, and Q is very well-versed in sports performance and everything that goes on with that. So the loose bodies, and obviously, look, he played football, right, for a little bit. Played it pretty high level, right? The NFL is pretty good, right? Played it for the Ravens, so he knows a thing or two about being a football player and everything that goes on. So we talked about how sometimes in football, just a collision or something, stuff like that can happen where something chips or there's something that goes on and you get rid of that. Probably just, it's a smaller procedure. I think at least it is. And it's something that just has to happen. I don't know if it's that invasive or not. Honestly, we didn't talk about that, but good news. I mean, on the surface level, right? It's good news on the surface level that Harbaugh's saying that, for Hamilton and Humphrey, they'll be available for training camp. We just aren't going to know if they're actually available until they actually get there and we actually get to training camp as well. Now, he was also asked about John Harbaugh as Kadir Ismail, who, again, name relation to Kadri. There is. Kadir is Kadri's son. And Kadir actually, development from Thursday, I forgot to mention this in the first part of the show, Kadir was working with the tight ends. Kadir is huge. He's 6'6", has that big-bodied frame. We know Baltimore's looking for that big-bodied receiver. We talked about that in the first segment with Tez Walker. But Kadir is huge. And we've kind of seen the Ravens explore this option with a bunch of different bigger wide receivers and especially undrafted guys. But Harbaugh was asked about that, and he said it's about exploring options. But again, like, these are pass catchers, right? Now, obviously, tight ends' responsibilities are a little different than wide receivers. You got to talk about being in line and blocking and whatnot. It's a different position. I'm not saying it's not, but I think the more you can do, especially in today's NFL, the more value you have. And so I think that's an incredible move for Kadir if he wants to be like kind of that wide receiver, tight end hybrid or whatever they want to do with him. And look, the Ravens are trying out guys at different spots. Obviously, they moved Malik Cunningham to wide receiver. They moved Darren Waller from wide receiver to tight end. Remember, Darren Waller just retired from the NFL, or he's expected to. I don't know if it's officially announced yet, but Ravens moved him from wide receiver to tight end and kind of got him going. Obviously, it didn't work out in Baltimore, but this type of thing, it doesn't work out all the time, but it has worked out before for the Ravens and a bunch of other teams. Speaking of tight ends, Isaiah Likely, John Harbaugh, tons of praise. Says he's happy with Isaiah, made a lot of wild plays this past week, and that he's going to be a big part of what the Ravens do this season, which absolutely is my number one thing that has to happen for this offense. Obviously, I want them to be more balanced in a vacuum, but at the end of the day, the Ravens have to find a way to get Isaiah Likely involved with and without Mark Andrews on the field, right? Andrews is going to be on there out on the field a lot of the time, right? He's their number one tight end. That doesn't change, even though Isaiah Likely has had a phenomenal couple of seasons when Andrews has gone down. When Andrews is healthy, he is their number one tight end, and that's fine. But because of that, you cannot limit Likely snaps. You have to be able to use him in 2 tight end sets. You can have Andrews in line and put Likely out in the slot or out wide. You can do so many different things, but you have to have Likely as a big part of your offense if you're the Ravens this year. Now, coming up in the final part of the show, we'll continue talking about what guys had to say at the podium, also dive a little bit into just some general stuff for the Ravens, Patrick Ricard, Steve Young. We'll get to that a little bit as well. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Purple Friday. Again, thank you so much for being here, being a part of the Locked On Ravens community, whether you're in video form, audio form, social media, subtext. Again, trying to start up that Instagram again. I always get into the habit of I start it up and then I get super busy. I forget about it. And then I start it up again, get super busy. So we're starting it up again. You can follow me over there and also on Twitter at KOStriker34. So, we got Ravens content coming for you every which way. Again, we'll have at least one bonus episode this weekend, one definitely coming out tomorrow, and then potentially on Sunday, that'll be in the bonus episode section on Locked On Ravens on the YouTube, that playlist below all the other stuff. And then for audio form, you don't have to worry. It's going to be just in your regular podcast feed. Now let's continue talking what John Harbaugh had to say to the media on Thursday. We'll get into also a bit of Kyle Van Noy and Marcus Williams as well. Now, in terms of Patrick Ricard's role, he said he's down about 10 pounds. Patrick Ricard did. And John Harbaugh saying that the role for him is going to evolve in terms of where the offense goes and what the offense needs. This is year 2 of Todd Monken's offense, right? There was a significant role for Patrick Ricard last season. There were a lot of questions about that last season. But to me, Todd Monken, and this goes far back beyond his Ravens days, which have not been that long, but he knows how to utilize his personnel. What type of personnel is he given? What type of offense is he inheriting? Monken is able to, whether you want to be a run-first offense, a pass-first offense, he is very adaptable to what his personnel is. So when people were saying, they're going to cut Ricard, they're going to trade him, Monken just said, no, we'll just use him. We'll just go out there and use him. And that's exactly what they did. So Ricard is a good football player. John Harbaugh said you put him out there. And at the end of the day, John Harbaugh also told a story about Wade Phillips when he was a defensive coordinator of the Rams, said that don't cover 42 as a defensive lineman when talking about Patrick Ricard. So, hey, Patrick Ricard touchdowns, few and far in between, but they are absolutely electric. I mean, they're one of my favorite things. Like, obviously, all Ravens touchdowns are awesome, but Patrick Ricard touchdowns just have that extra electricity to them. I can't really describe it, if we're being honest. Now, we've heard a lot of rumblings about Adarius Washington potentially taking over as Baltimore's number 3 safety this year, assuming they don't bring in any other veteran talent. They brought in Jamal Adams for a visit, but nothing has materialized there. Harbaugh was asked about Washington, said that he's looked really good, and he feels great about him. And he's established himself. Obviously, he's been in the league for a couple of years now. It's just been about the injuries for him. But they want to get him out there, get him in some games, see how it works out. So that's the goal for Adarius Washington for the Ravens. And then talked a bit about Jim Harbaugh going up against him. And then Malik Cunningham said he's looked good at wide receiver, and he's a natural at the position. He understands the game from the perspective of a quarterback, and the routes and timing and everything has been really good for him because of that extra nuance of his game. So we've talked a lot about, how Tyler Wallace stepped up during minicamp, and Cunningham did as well, Isaiah Washington, a bunch of guys. We'll talk about that in the next couple of days here on Locked On Ravens, so stay tuned for more so of studs and duds or rashes and fallers. We'll do another. People really liked that episode we did on Monday, so we're going to do that again next Monday for minicamp. Just putting that out there as a mini preview, assuming nothing crazy happens. Sometimes content can get a little crazy, and the Ravens do something. We got to adjust that schedule. But assuming nothing crazy happens Monday, we'll do that. But Cunningham was definitely someone who made a name for himself here. Now, Van Noy. We'll talk about Kyle Van Noy now. Said that he feels great. He's in year 11 now, which is kind of crazy to think about. It feels like Van Noy, I know he's been in the league a while. He's been around a little bit, but year 11 is kind of crazy to think about when you talk about Kyle Van Noy. And now, look, a big thing, if we remember, Van Noy signed with the Ravens technically early in the year, but during the season last year. It wasn't quite mid-season, but coming in and having that just familiarity with the system, first of all, I know it's going to be new under Zach Gore technically, but I think they're keeping a lot of the same stuff Mike McDonald did from last season. It's different when you have off season and you know where you're going to be and you got training camp going on. And obviously these workouts like OTAs and minicamp, that's a different type of feeling. And Van Noy talked about, you don't have to get to know as many people. You're already familiar with guys, having relationships. He mentioned Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, etc. So that really helps as well. Now, for him, he also talked about the fact that Zach Orr didn't necessarily say it right off the bat, but he was asked about if Zach Orr becoming a defensive coordinator actually impacted his decision to re-sign with the Ravens. And again, didn't say that matter of fact, but did say he loves Zach Orr, a big fan, and said that, the passion that Zach Orr has, the energy that Zach Orr has, it's infectious and prides himself on relationships and communication. So we know Orr, especially, if you've been following this team for a while, we all know Zach Orr from his playing days. and his 3 years there last year in the NFL, he was a all-pro. He's been around now. Obviously, he's a first-time coordinator, and that's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But much like we saw and heard from John Harbaugh say about Malik Cunningham, he has that extra layer, and I think that will help him in the long run there. Now, I think that when you're talking about the differences between McDonald and Zach Orr, Van Noy wouldn't go into too many differences, but again, he's excited about what Zach Orr can bring to the table. Very good defense. He thinks they'll be again, so that's exciting as well. Had a lot of praise for Odafe Owe, said that, sky's the limit. He's a quote-unquote specimen, according to Kyle Van Noy, so that's really fun. But they're going to have to rely on guys. And we know Van Noy, hopefully with his veteran presence, will pick up right where he left off. But Odafe Owe, can he fully break out this season? David Ajabo, is he going to step up this season and be healthy? Those are two really important factors for it as well. And Marcus Williams talked about, or he was asked at least about his injury situation, and really kind of deflected all the questions. He ended up saying, injuries happen in the year and you got to overcome them and all that different type of stuff. And kind of pushed it off, not in like a disrespectful way. Don't take it that way. It wasn't disrespectful, but just seemed really like he wanted to put that behind him, get out and play football. So, when he said, quote, when he asked about injuries, I'm going to tell you the same thing. I've been me. This is me. I'm just going to continue to get better. So, I mean, again, it just feels like Williams has a mentality of, it happened, we're done with it, we're moving on. And that's the injury situation. Had a lot of high praise for Darius Washington and talked about Kyle Hamilton. Said rankings didn't mean anything, but again, he said they're confident in themselves and that'll be fine. Has a lot of expectations for himself in the secondary coming up this year, which again, I think all positional groups should have high expectations for themselves this time of year. Said that Hamilton's been a great player and really praised his work ethic, whether it be in the film room, off-season work, getting to where he needs to be. This is year 3 for Kyle Hamilton. I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like Kyle Hamilton's been in the league both forever and not at all. Like it feels like he's already such a veteran because he's already so good. Like when you draft a player, sometimes it takes a while from the fully realized potential. You're talking like year 3. It's like, okay, can they fully break out this season? Kyle Hamilton was a stud from year 1. Like Hamilton was literally going out there and balling out in year 1. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So just seems like he's such a grizzled veteran already, even though he's only entering his 3rd year. Talked about also being a leader, said he's always been a leader, always been vocal. He's been doing that. So something that is new to, he said, is not new to him, is true to him. So he said, a little line there, which was fun. Now he ended up not giving away literally any secrets here. Marcus Williams was not having it. He was asked about what defensive coordinator Zach Orr's defense could look like, and here's his full answer. His defense. That's the whole answer. Nothing else. His defense. Not in the giving away secrets industry, and guess what? That's a very good thing. So shout out Marcus Williams for not giving away any industry secrets or team secrets there when asked by the media. Now, let's talk a tiny bit just about miscellaneous stuff. Patrick Ricard went on with Chris Long and talked a little bit about the AFC Championship game, said that, when you look back on it, they should have run the ball more, but that's not up to him. The coaches do that thing. And I mean, I feel like that's kind of the sentiment that a lot of, whether it's Harbaugh, Monken, Ricard, these players, I think they understand what happened. Like, doesn't excuse the fact that it did. And obviously, like, you're not blaming the players for that. Obviously, Ricard is right. That's a coach's thing. That's a game plan thing where that's not the player's responsibility, right? The players is to go out there and execute. The coaches are supposed to come up with a game plan. Like, we're not going to talk about it in so much detail. Happened so long ago at this point. Like, we're talking about the same thing over and over. We don't have to do that. But Ricard did say that he wasn't even, like, he didn't even know that they ran the ball that little until after the game. Like, he thought that they ran it more. And then I guess, he had that realization moment of like, oh man, wow. So, frustrating to think about, obviously, but let's just not talk about it anymore, right? let's just move on. But I guess not fully, because Steve Young was asked about Lamar Jackson, gave 3 incredible minutes of Lamar Jackson insight. Now, he talked about the fact that, yes, the AFC Championship game was a bummer. And look, certainly it was. We're not going to shy away from that, right? But at the end of the day, he says, quote, the arc of his career, Lamar Jackson's career, has been slowed by Baltimore's fanaticism with the run. They're coming out of that trance. He called it a transition year, or last year at least was the transition year for the Ravens. talked about, he said he's a player that has the potential to be as great as anyone we've ever seen play, and talked about their talent, right? Said that they probably something a little more wide receiver, said they need another tight end. I mean, they don't. They have Isaiah Likely, but still, like he said, give Lamar Brock Purdy's talent, and he's unstoppable. Stuff along those lines. So acknowledging a lot. Well, actually, again, if we do a bonus episode on Sunday, still debating whether we're going to do that or not. I need to come with other things to talk about besides that. We will mention Steve Young in more detail and talk about everything he had to say. We'll get into much more detail on these comments, but we do know that this team has been very run heavy, and they bring in Derrick Henry. It's not like they're going to go and throw the ball 40 times a game right now, right? They're still going to rely on their run game as they should, something they didn't do in the AFC Championship game. But he did say that while that game was a bummer, Baltimore's organization is coming out of that trance now. And, that to me is a good thing. You need to be more balanced, but also feeding your identity. That's another big thing as well. That's all I have here today, though. I'm Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Again, we'll be right back here tomorrow with a bonus episode of the show. So be sure to subscribe, follow along, audio form, video form, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.